that today what we really wanted to do is come on and give a little like snapshot into a coaching session specifically around a low histamine diet, because that's something that I right now am personally working with, even though I don't want to be working with, but I can give a little more background, but it's something that I'm working with right now. And as Megan and I were talking today and doing some work, I was sharing more about what was going on for me with like going down this route of trying a low histamine diet, and something that I've like avoided for a while, but certain symptoms that are happening for me like prompted me to know that this was something I might need or want to work with right now. And just the rabbit hole that I was able to like get myself down, and being able to speak with Megan in the ways that, I can actually like pull me out of going down that hole or that path. And it's something we see with a lot of our clients, and it's something that like we each in our own different ways personally experience. So we wanted to bring like a kind of a snapshot today specifically around that, to give a little information, but to also give some insight into how we coach around these things.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, so much of what we're doing at the Slow Medicine Collective is practicing the medicine that we have to offer. And there was a brief moment right before we got onto this live where I was like, wait, is it okay for us to share the issues that we're going through? Christina has her health challenges that she has, and I have my health challenges. And we've collectively both been in practice for more than 20 years, but we still have our stuff. Like, we are not perfect people. And so much of, where this Slow Medicine Collective was birthed was from the place of that which you have to offer is that what you yourself are working with. So when we were on the phone and we were just kind of doing our Monday morning check-in, and she was like, I went down the mast cell histamine rabbit hole, and I was like, let me pull you let me pull you out here. And even in, as I was coaching her and listening to what she was reflecting, essentially all I was doing was reflecting back to you some of the things that you yourself are mentioning and talking to your clients about. So we just thought it would be really, number one, transparent. Also, number two, a really good opportunity for people to witness how Christina and I work with each other, and supporting each other in, on our health journeys. And we thought today would be a fun one to dive in with the ever so delightful and extremely easy topic of a low histamine diet.
Yeah, it's like, I think that this one sent me into such a spiral because it's like, it's complex, like we were talking, and like for me being in the place of feeling some of these symptoms. So like one of the symptoms that I've been feeling, or a couple different symptoms, were around like this like throat clearing, or this feeling in my throat every time I eat, that there's like a reaction happening. And the problem is, and then tying this to like bigger symptoms for me of like when I get, if I get a flare, I get tipped over into a flare. For me, it's this like fevers, and it's this big giant immune response. And coming in the wake of experiencing that after some big hormone shifts, I know that like, it's almost like I'm like, my mast cells, like I know, that like something's going on there, but it's still so complex. And so for my brain to start to say, okay, I think that, I'm noticing here that something is happening with like my histamine levels or my mast cells, or, a doctor prescribed me like an antihistamine nasal spray to help with whatever's going on when I eat. And I noticed that when I did that, my symptoms got better. So it was like this interest, but I don't want to be taking something like that for the rest of my life, and it just kind of spurred me into, okay, here's a problem to solve for yourself. And I solve problems for other people all the time. But for me, I was like, it kicks me into like big overwhelm of like, here's the problem I have to solve. I'm okay, I'm gonna do this low histamine. I have this information. And what we say sometimes is like, you can't unsee something you've seen, you know? So I'm like, okay, well, now I've seen that this makes a difference for me, but how do I incorporate this in my life without it like wildly stressing me out? Because when I was speaking to you this morning, I was like, definitely, you know, in the rabbit hole
Mm-hmm.
of how do I fix this problem for myself? And it's so all encompassing.
Right. Well, and so much of what we talk about is how do we step out of the fix it mode, right? Like yes, there's a problem and there is a solution that you were able to see. And girl, you and I have been talking about histamine stuff for a little while.
Yeah.
But you really got to experience and see a direct result by taking the nasal antihistamine. So that was essentially the proof that your mind needed of like, oh, okay, I need to take more than a low histamine probiotic and take more than, Aller-C, quercetin, and bioflavonoids for my body to really see an effect and a response. And it's also, I mean, one of the things we've talked about too is for things like mast cell or mastocytosis or mast cell disruption or histamine intolerance, you can fill in the blank. Everybody has their own experience with this. You're really on a spectrum, and where you are on that spectrum varies day to day. So when we go into that fix it mode, we lose sight of the spectrum because we want to go from one side of the rainbow to the other side of the rainbow instantaneously without looking at where we're actually landing and what contributes to that spectrum. I mean, when we think about histamine intolerance, typically food is the thing, it's like the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? So we've got we like to think about histamine in the form of a bucket. What's filling that bucket? There's allergens, environmental allergens that can be filling it. There's stress that can be filling it. There's hormonal disruptions that can be filling it. And then at any moment, depending on where you are on that spectrum, your food may tip the bucket over. And one of the things with you, Christina, is you do the shit out of things. Like you do the shit out of everything, which is amazing and wonderful until it's speeds you up too much, and sometimes in order to speed it up we have to slow it down, right? So, and that's where identifying where we are on that spectrum of, you get to fill in the blank. For you, it's your histamine
Mm-hmm.
spectrum. You were real far on it to where I was having to pull you out a little bit, not a lot. I mean, this isn't new information for you, but one of the things we were talking about with Christina, who does the shit out of pretty much everything, for her, it's like, okay, let's take what you think you need to do. Low histamine diet is no joke. It is, people talk about the AIP diet, people talk about elimination diets. Like, yeah, everything is difficult until you've done a low histamine diet and you're like, holy shit, this is insane.
Right.
This is not joy. I've lost joy. So and that's the problem with the spectrum, because if where you are on that spectrum isn't matching what you actually can do, you're going to bump up in a
Yeah.
really big way. So taking what you think you can do and dividing it in half and starting there. And when I reflected to you, well, wait, weren't you just talking to a client about, is there room for this?
Yeah.
And you were like, oh, yeah, you're right. So what do
Yeah.
you have room for in doing the low histamine protocol?
And I think that's the question is like, and the things that speed you up. So for me, it's like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this thing and I've got to do it. And I get this feeling of if I don't do it right now, then I'm like harming myself or something, or, like I know that I can do this for myself and that this might help. So if I don't do it, and I have these like lingering like symptoms and things, it just is this reminder that like I'm not doing enough, or like I could be doing it more. And that is really harmful. That's really harmful because it speeds me up and it makes me lose sight of all the other things that might be contributing to that histamine bucket increasing. And it's like, okay, I got to do the food. And it's, yeah, I've coached clients through histamine diets before, like, and they're really hard, you know, and I've, you know, worked with people through them, but there's something that happens in the brain, at least for me, that's like, but I can't do this halfway, you know? And so it's the feeling of, I'm either going to do it and like go all the way, or what's the point kind of thing. And I think that I know that a lot of people experience that as well, but I like really felt it this weekend, and it's almost like I couldn't help it. You know, like it just started to speed it up, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was like ordering all these like crazy things on Amazon from this amazing woman's site, and like, she's great, but I was like tiger nut flakes, like cacao butter, like you know, like I'm like, oh, I need this, and it just it can speed us up. And so there's that fear then like comes up for me in slowing down and like looking at where I'm actually at on the spectrum.
And what would you say is one of the number, as a from practitioner to practitioner, what would you say is one of the number one contributors to that bucket being full?
I like nervous system.
Okay. Check in. Yeah. So we're
yeah,
on the same page.
totally. And you know, that in that overdrive, like that's where it comes in for me. And so I think, you know, even just like when I get to experience things like this, it puts me right back in a client mindset. And because there's always big or small little things I'm working on, but this one's like been big. Like I've been dealing with bigger
well,
ones.
it's a literal life or death situation for you, and you know, especially with the condition that you have, you know, there is, and you have had major trauma with what you've experienced with your health. So
yeah,
and you've pulled yourself, especially, you know, coming from being a cardiac ICU nurse, like you've been in many different places and many different high stress places, and also your system and your body has experienced some pretty major flares that you really were the one who pulled yourself out of those. So it makes sense to
to be like, oh, here we go. Okay, there's another thing to solve because it worked in the past. And it's like the new way that I want to engage with healing is like understanding that that's a really stressful headspace to be in, and that used to work for me in terms of like just getting me out, you know, having like big fever flares and big like mast cell responses and things like that used to work. But now I can feel myself go into it and try and be like the fixer, the problem solver of it. But like it's not the best way, you know, as hard as it is to slow down. And that like slowing down to speed it up is just like pump the brakes for a second. Like that's what I needed to do when I was like deep diving on all this mast cell stuff and histamine diet. Like I just needed to like pump the brakes and let myself off the hook a little bit. It was basically like, well, if I don't eat the right meal for the next meal that's like this perfect low histamine meal, then I'm like, what am I even doing? You know, and so it's a little bit getting out of that like activated place, I think, and coming back to it's okay. Like it doesn't all have to happen right now. And that is like a big pattern for me, is like, okay, I now know that this needs to happen. Okay, now it needs to happen right now. And that's like the speeding up of it. So some way to like interrupt that, you know, is really helpful. But it's such a work in progress.
It is. And I mean, instead of it being a full-blown, Christina is now on a low histamine diet for everything. Is it, let's work with breakfast? Do you know, like, where does the tiger nut flake, or what the hell did you buy, tiger nut flakes and cacao, coconut butter, cacao butter, where do those things fit into your morning? And what do you already have in your tool belt that you're working with that you can bring into the morning. And that can also be that more foundational place where you can stand, so that instead of expecting this like flood of ability to do all the things that are going to inevitably help you, but we have to build a foundation for you to stand on, so that you can do something with lunch, you can do something with dinner, you can do something with the snack. But what's going on at breakfast, that for the next, you know, however long you need, ideally no less than like 4 to 7 days, that you can get really, really solid on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that I think that's the piece that I was really feeling into. Like whenever I'm going through stuff, I'm always kind of looking through it a lens of like, this is how my client feels, and this is how my, and like the funny thing is that I've had to like, I've tried almost everything or done experienced. I think you and me collectively have experienced almost like everything that there is to experience health. No, I don't even want to say that because the universe is going to hear me say that. So we've experienced a significant amount of things, which allows us to really, like, when being with someone, really have that firsthand experience of, I know what that's like, and actually, like, here's what worked for me, or here's what helped me. And it's always tailored to the individual, but it's like having had that experience and that deep like experience of it. So I'm always like thinking through that lens when I'm like stuff is happening to me. But I was like, yeah, how would it feel to just land with figuring out breakfast and just be, and the seed sweeper, by the way, that is a recipe that we have. If you are dealing with any kind of like histamine or mast cell thing, message us and we'll give you a seed sweeper recipe. But you know, that was when I was already working with, and I was like, oh, okay, like I can just eat that for breakfast, and that's great. And then I will figure out the next thing soon. And, you know, my symptoms aren't so severe right now that it, you know, like I can live like this, and that's okay. And I can give myself that gentle time to rest into it. And like how you said, like create something to stand on, because if I don't have something to stand on, that's when I fall into like the pit of like, oh my God,
Yeah.
everything.
Well, and it's the healing in and of itself becomes a traumatic experience, because sometimes,
Yeah.
especially with dietary stuff, I mean, I see that's a lot with the kids that I work with, where, you know, the parents they're ready to like do the thing, you know, their kids are really suffering and they're ready to do any diet, they're ready to
Yeah.
get their kid to take any supplement that's needed, and yes, 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 all of that. But also for children, how do we make this as non-traumatic of an experience as possible? And for a lot of kids, taking out gluten or taking out dairy or taking out any of the, you know, more inflammatory foods is, you know, there's ways to do it in a strategy that take longer, but it makes the healing doesn't become traumatic. Because when the healing becomes traumatic, that's where we are bumping into a really, really big problem. And I think you and I both collectively over the last 20 years have seen a lot of people come in from really, you know, amazing clinics and amazing places that have done a lot, but the healing experience has in some way contributed to the nervous system of the client or the patient that has then sent them spinning. And honestly, if you're feeling out of your body, if you're not able to drop into your body, it's really, really hard to heal in a deep way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I 100% agree. And yeah, we definitely have seen that. And that's, I think, what we are trying to do differently. And like my medicine in what I'm working with right now is doing it differently within my own body and self, so that I can, because it's easier for me to help other people do it differently. It's just, it's easier. And I can see it with them. And I can see when people are going down that rabbit hole and healing is turning traumatic. And, you know, it's the experience of, say I went to a practitioner, an awesome one, and they said, you have like mast cell issues and you need to go on a low histamine diet. And they gave me a giant food list and were like, see ya, and all these supplements, I would spin out. Like that would happen.
You would do it though. That's the thing.
Do it.
You would
Because
do it.
I would do it. And I would go so hard in doing it that I would stress myself right out.
And you're
and it
fresh.
wouldn't be fun, and it would be like, and so I think, we hear a lot of people too that have that experience of like, if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. And oftentimes there's like invested a lot of money or, in it. And it's like, okay, I gotta do it. Or it's just a strong desire to get better. Like for me, it's just a strong desire to like fix a problem. And then when you do that and you burn out and you're like, this sucks, which is how I feel about the low-histamine diet, but I have some good recipes. And I'm like, it's okay. I defrosted my like chicken and sweet potato, and I made this like cauliflower hummus thing today. So like it's pretty good. Um, but the other side of it is like, screw it, I'm gonna do nothing. And like where we're working right now is that middle path. And that's my work to do too, like for myself. And then that's really the work that we're inviting, other people into as well in slow medicine.
Beautifully said. We are not going fast like that siren is going
Can you
in
hear
the
it?
background. Yeah.
I live in LA.
Beautiful.
Amazing. Well, thank you for helping to pull me out of the rabbit hole that I was in.
Anytime. I'm always here to pull you out any day.
I appreciate it. And we hope that this is helpful for everybody else too. If you want to know more about one-on-one coaching and kind of the work we do, we're so happy to share with you. We have spots open for one-on-one coaching to support you as well right now. And yeah, we're here for you. We have some pretty exciting offerings coming up in the new year that we'll talk about later. But really, truly hope that this has been helpful time to spend with us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.